Hi, I'm Liam and I'm here with Simon and we're here to talk about how to optimize your lead routing. So, to start very high level, what are the lead routing best practices? Where would you start?
I would probably start out looking at my business and looking at the business and seeing, okay, who do we have available in the first place to route something to? I think that's something that's very critical, but we, for example, have MDRs, SDRs, AEs, that's like generally speaking who we can send stuff to. And then we want to look at, okay, what segments and regions are we covering to really make sure the right person goes to the right segment, to the right AE, SDR, MDR. We wanted to think about time zones if we can. So if we have a team that is in different time zones, we want to make sure that someone gets followed up within their time zone. Just because it makes it easier. We had cases where that wasn't the case, where one segment was just one team in one country, and that definitely led to issues, and then we needed to tweak it a bit. We also want to think about language, and I think one thing there is like it gets a bit tricky because, for example, we have a German and a French website, and really everything that comes through there we send to the German and French reps because the whole experience for the user is in that language. So even if they might be in a different country, they come through a German language page, we probably want to follow up with a German speaker. That's like very high level. We then want to think about, okay, that person coming in that we need to route, where do they stand in the customer lifecycle? Are they a prospect? Do we already have an open opportunity, or are they already a customer? And then depending on that, we want to route those people to different, groups within the organization. Like prospects is probably the biggest amount of inbounds. We want to see, okay, who's best for following up. And then customers probably should go to the customer, either CSM or the customer account manager. And then when we think about open ops as well, probably the person this company is already in contact with. Then if we go, we've decided how everything is structured, I think then to make sure we don't have anyone forgotten, we want to make sure we have certain reports set up that will really tell us, have we forgotten someone? We have an unactioned inbound report. I think that's the easiest way. Make sure every single person that comes in that fills out a form, wants a demo, wants some pricing, requests time with you, that they have a follow-up. I think that's very basic, but still it can be forgotten because it's so complex. And then one step deeper, you want to then start looking into your whole funnel, into everyone's coming in, who everyone's going to, and you probably want to segment them by cohorts and see, is there specific groups of people in certain segments of regions that do better than others? Why is that? Sometimes it's the nature of the business, right? Enterprise accounts move very differently from small and mid-sized businesses. But if we think about different countries as well, where do we see maybe certain cohorts performing less than others? Why is that, and how can we then improve routing to optimize that?
And all of that then basically enables us to sort of control lead leakage and then improve essentially the conversion rates throughout the funnel, because people, I suppose, are speaking to the right people at the right time, in the right language, and also, we're able to track and each of those individual segments and improve and find ways of improving performance, because we can drill down into things. How do we go about in that routing system that we can improve speed to lead?
So I think the first thing you want to think about is what are your SLAs? What timeframes are you okay with as a business for things to take to follow up? And I think there's different factors that factor into that, what is the volume? What is the expectation as well from the user? If you have booked a meeting time next week, I probably want to receive some kind of thanks for booking the meeting time on the day I fill out the form, but I might not have to speak to someone before that, straight away within an hour or something, because we've already booked time with that person. So have clear defined SLAs for the different scenarios and depending on what the user expects. And then to really help our sales reps and our MDRs to, succeed and getting those SLAs in place, we automate as much as we can. And it doesn't mean we send out automated messages to our inbound, but it means that so they come through our lead routing, they come through the funnel, they fill out a form, they get routed to the person, and at the same point in time, they get added to some kind of like follow-up cadence, which is usually based on, again, expectations. If I requested a time, the follow-up cadence is different to someone who didn't request a time, and we might have to follow up with and schedule a time. But making it as automated as possible to basically allow the reps to just focus on doing the job instead of like, oh, when do I have to follow up with this person, and like having to keep an eye on their inbound Outlook or like email messaging service, being like, oh, there's someone coming in, I need to follow up now. We try and automate as much as possible through automated sequences. The other thing, as I talked about already a bit, is like direct booking. Like for us, it has been a massive help in increasing speed to lead. We saw that if we basically take out a step of like that kind of like scheduling, when are you free, by asking people like, this is the time you can select, that just it decreases by a couple of days usually our average speed to lead and our average time until we talk to someone and have an opportunity booked or qualified in or out. And then the last thing is really about, again, feedback with the sales reps. So we want to make sure that we don't overqualify or underqualify. So we need to have a constant discussion with sales and with the people who get the inbounds, and they need to tell us what is working, what isn't working, where do they see issues. And then we can take that into account and adjust the routing so that we basically balance the needs of the user, and like, I want to speak to someone as fast as possible. I don't want to be, I personally as a user don't like having a discovery call, but I know how important it is to then get a good demo. And for some users, this might not be the case. But you need that feedback to, find that kind of balance. It's like, okay, where do we put the user on a pedestal almost, and where do we to give you the best experience, we actually need to unfortunately add an extra step.
Yeah, and like feedback, I think, from the sales team can unlock certain things. Like you might find, for example, that they're being routed something in a time zone that means that actually getting that meeting is really difficult, and that's actually affecting their speed to lead, or maybe they're missing a valuable piece of data, or the data's inaccurate, that means that they're unable to hit those SLAs. And I think that's where you get like that sort of information that you wouldn't be able to see in the data. You might just see, for example, I know for us, like we like don't have a presence in like Australia, and leads that come through there becomes extremely hard for the sales team to create those meetings, so those SLAs obviously then suffer. I know something else we do is run sort of closed lost ops surveys, which also gives us time for the prospect to like feedback as well, and let us know like how their process went, if there's anywhere in between there that maybe they struggle to actually meet up with and hook up with the sales rep and find out, and then we can try and address those issues too.
Yeah, and I think like the flip side sometimes can be that, like as we said, for example, the Australia example, like we have longer lead times there, and I think sometimes it's okay to accept that and realize the reasons and say, well, we can't, as a business right now, we can't service them in time zone, and I think that's fine. And I think you shouldn't become over reliant on speed to lead as your almost indicator how well you're doing, because like at the end of the day, you want revenue. That's where you need to measure against, and it's just if you can actually find a correlation between speed to lead and revenue, where you have to be a bit more careful and like put more steps in place. But as I said, if someone books a meeting in 2 weeks' time, I probably don't need to follow up with them within an hour. It's then more important that at that time we make sure we have the right follow-up in place for them to then actually show up and actually be nurtured already, maybe with some marketing messages at that point. But we don't need to over emphasize the speed to lead.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really great point. So when it comes to lead enrichment, what are the main benefits there for then lead routing?
So I think for lead routing, the main benefit is that you get more data points to really make your decision based on, without necessarily having to ask it on the form or at inbound or at entry point. So for us, for example, when we think about like company size, to make sure we know which segment they fall into, we don't want to really ask that on a form, not only because it would be an additional field, but also because employees don't necessarily know how big the organization is when it comes to how many employees they work for. They don't also know what they mean. Like there's, parent and child companies, and they have different sizes. So having that all enriched helps operations to make routing decisions based on very specific data points, and we also control those data points. So yeah, it's that kind of mix of like getting more data points and then also making sure we don't need to ask all of them to the inbound. And then once we have all of that set up, having those additional data points helps me to analyze the routing a bit better. So I look at all the different entry points, all the different outcomes, different people, and then I can really drill down and see maybe where have we routed differently to where we wanted to, and that's sometimes because data points change. But also, where do we see efficiencies and inefficiencies? For example, we had a case where we were sending a certain segment to a certain group of people, but then we found out that because that segment also has people all across the world, that in certain regions it would be much more beneficial to send them to a rep in a different segment but in the same region, because the follow-up times are just better. And having a full set of data with all the data points really allows you to drill into these details.
Amazing. Yeah, it makes sense. That I think I love the point that people don't actually always know the answers. Actually, by enriching stuff, you're actually more accurate than asking them directly, which I think people assume that like firsthand they're going to get better and more accurate data, but that's not actually always necessarily the case. And I know for us as well in marketing that actually how we then enrich that data means that we can also allow them to be routed into like correct campaigns as well. So for example, we're not going to be asking on the form what department or like, as we would put it, persona people would fall into. That's something we're going to want to enrich on the back end ourselves, so we can actually send people then a message that aligns with the persona that they're And you touched on direct to AE booking a little bit earlier, but how does like direct to AE booking and also grading of the MQLs and opportunities to come in, how does that benefit as well in your routing?
So especially when we take both together, I think we can get immense benefits. So I'm thinking of the conversion funnel, and I'm thinking of all the steps someone usually goes through, like an inbound prospect. And you have, like they fill out a form, then they somehow need to have a time to be qualified, disqualified, then they have to, again, the time and need to schedule time for the demo request, and then once the demo request happens, then sales has to do all the follow-up and their evaluation. And that's like a lot of steps actually before someone actually then sits on a demo and sees your product and knows about your product. So where then lead grading can help and direct meeting booking is, so you say we want to give people, as many people as possible, basically the option to book a time with you. But if we lead grading, for example, our A grade, our best inbounds, we know they're very high and very likely to convert. We almost don't need that qualification step. So what happens if we cut that out? And we can only cut that out by having that grading ready and available, because it tells us, okay, this person's an A inbound, very likely they're going to convert. So let's skip that qualification step. Let's give them time straight for a demo. And it differs from business to business. Some businesses have an easier time giving a demo off the bat, but if you need some pre-qualification to make sure you give the best demo possible, then you need to balance that kind of need of like, I need to do my research and actually giving the extra step to the prospect. It's just giving them an extra place where they can drop off. And if you reduce that, you reduce drop off, and you can just like streamline the funnel that way.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, so it's almost like being able to create your priority queues, I suppose, where you fast track some people through, and others you like deprioritize, but for the benefit then to the business and also to the customers that will get the most value out of the product as well.
Exactly, and it's all about like making sure your resources are used in the best way possible. So if your AEs have the capacity and the time to take on direct meeting, and the way we measured, we look at like, okay, the meetings we book from like say like a supporting function like an MDR, SDR function, and the meeting that we book straight away to an AE, like those are all meetings that come into our AEs. We want to make sure that the conversion rates from then on are very similar, so that like that pre-qualification that we do through the grading is at the same level as someone, when a person does it like an SDR or an MDR. So you really want to make sure you use your resources optimal, because as well that means that your SDRs, MDRs free up time that they can use to really get to those people that didn't put a time in, that we knew it's harder to get in touch with, where we have to do the qualification, so they have the time and the resources to do that extra qualification.
Sorry.
I don't see it. I can see it.
I don't think it really matters. It kind of adds to the vibe. The vibe. It's the corporate vibe. You've got, you know.
I was like, don't look at it.
Yeah.